Super Smash Bros. Is probably my most played video game franchise, and if I had to put a number to it, I'd say it's fun around, give or take 52% of the time. Honestly though, even though these games are mostly known for their multiplayer, I feel like this series really peaked with Brawl's adventure mode, the Subspace Emissary, as I've always been a bigger fan of story-based platformers than fighting games. And you know me, if I like something, then I gotta break it. So today, I'm gonna be running through this entire thing without jumping. Oh wait, okay, never mind. Let's see here, maybe a pacifist challenge? What about no attacking? 30-second video, that's not a good sign. Okay, yeah, no, super not good. What about no moving then? That could be cool. Hey, and no one's done a video on that one yet either, so this should be nice and easy. Now the rules here are pretty self-explanatory. I'm just not allowed to use the joystick. And although this obviously means that we won't be doing too much moving anytime soon, it also means that we can't do most attacks, dodge, enter doors, drop through platforms, or climb ladders, just to name a few things. Or at least that would be the case if it weren't for this guy. If we play with a GameCube controller, or this thing apparently, then we gain access to a second joystick, which I'll be referring to as the C-Stick. We can bind the C-Stick to a few different things, which will allow us to do attacks that usually require directional input without needing to hold the direction. And although we could use Smash or Tilt Stick, which would not only give us access to Smash attacks or tilts respectively, I instead opted for Special Stick. This gives us access to every character's special moves, which are generally much more unique and interesting than the normal moves. Depending on the character, having access to specials gives them actual movement options, or at least some other interesting mechanic that may be useful in a challenge like this. However, on that same note, some characters get literally nothing, so we'll just have to figure it out as we go along. One thing the C-Stick does for every character, however, is let you roll if you tilt it while shielding. However, I thought it was just a little too powerful to give every character a solid movement option in a challenge that's supposed to constrict movement, so I decided that rolling with the C-Stick is banned. So with that, let's stop talking and actually play the dang video game. We start off in Nondescript Arena Land, in a duel between Mario and Kirby. We can choose which character we play as during the fight, so I obviously went with Mario. This guy ain't great or anything, but his up B does propel him forward just the tiniest bit, which makes him at least usable. Additionally, he can shoot fireballs, and as a motionless sentry turret, a projectile is a pretty good thing for a character to have in this challenge. Because of my limited moveset, I ended up killing Kirby here with a back throw, something you're usually only able to do with the joystick, but much like rolling, the C-Stick, for some reason, works just as well. Following this, we had a boss fight and a horde fight, neither of which were too difficult. The boss fight, though, was at least a little interesting, as we have a choice between either saving Peach or Zelda, and we actually get to play as whoever we save in an upcoming level. This means that we have a bit of an important decision to make. Luckily, though, it's not too difficult of a decision. Although Zelda can transform into Sheik, which nearly doubles her moveset, neither of these characters do literally anything, so it looks like we're saving Peach instead. We'll talk about Peach later though, cause now we're in Sky World, which marks the first level that doesn't give us a choice of who to play. Luckily, Pit ain't too bad. His side special, which is really cool and not annoying, gives us short bursts of forward movement when we use it on the ground. However, as we see in a very short bit and come across our old friend, the Massive Wall, it does nothing when it comes to moving in the air. And this is going to be a recurring theme for a lot of characters. Now, although this seemed pretty hopeless, as none of Pit's other special moves help out at all when it comes to movement, he does have one other strange ability. An ability that he shares with only 2 other characters in the entire game: gliding. By holding the jump button after flapping his wings in the air, Pit will enter gliding mode. With the joystick, you actually have a lot of control with what you can do with this, but even without it, gliding is a pretty good way of traveling forward through the air. So with this, we can still not make it over the wall. Gliding's weakness is its startup, as you actually lose a lot of height in the air before it activates, making it seem useless here. However, if we use what movement options we do have to make our way up onto this ledge, we can start gliding from up here and use the initial height to fly right on over, allowing Pit to soar over the wall and earn his spot in the god dang annoying tier. Phew, that was actually a pretty close one. I thought we were already done for, but we really lucked out. Ah shoot, wait a minute. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, entering doors usually requires tapping up on the joystick. But with no joystick, it seems pretty clear that we won't be making much progress in this level. Wait, what? Never mind, I guess. The C-Stick, once again, somehow, comes to our rescue. Alright, that's it. If you're like me, you're probably wondering at this point why the C-Stick, which is supposed to just do specials, is for some reason capable of inputting rolls, throws, and entering doors now? Not only that, but it's also really inconsistent, which seems to indicate that these aren't intentional functions of the C-Stick, but rather side effects of some sinister underlying curse behind the spaghetti code that holds this thing together. So let's talk about my theory as to what's going on here. So the C-Stick input is actually what's called a macro, which just means one input that turns challenge into multiple inputs. For example, here the game sees me tilt the C-stick to the right and translates it into a right input and a B input in order to do a side special. Yeah, it's all coming together in your head, isn't it? If that B input can't be processed, such as, for example, when in shield or when grabbing someone, the game only sees the directional input and says, yeah, I mean, I can work with that. Now, although that all adds up, tapping the C-stick up to enter doors makes a lot less sense. Some way or another, the B input must just get lost or something, or maybe is just a little late to the party somehow, leaving behind a rogue up input that the game, like a goddamn idiot, thinks is just a normal up input and uses it to go into the door. Whatever, whether the C-stick is broken or not, we can at least use it to continue on in the level. We pick up Mario halfway through, but I of course stick it out with Pit, who's proven to be pretty dang useful. The level also started to introduce enemies, who can knock you around out of your control and be general nuisances, but they're not too big of a problem for now. I did, however, die near the end of the level, and although I could have just killed Mario here to respawn back as Pit, I decided to try and salvage my lives and use some of Mario's other movement tech to continue on. However, his up B isn't nearly enough to make it across these gaps, so I instead had to use his fully charged flood to propel myself backwards to get across them. Oh yeah, I'm not moving, but I'm definitely schmoving. Moving on, or not moving on. Soon, Pit and Mario were out of there, so it was time for Kirby and the newly rescued Peach to make their debut in an actual level. It's worth noting here that Kirby is the default choice of who to play, and for the first time in the challenge is not a viable option, as he straight up can't move. This means that we have to select Peach, but isn't the joystick required to move the cursor around and select the characters? No, you're not catching me slipping. I'm using the dang D-pad for menuing. Unfortunately, it's not quite as broken as the C-stick, but at the very least has this going for it. Oh yeah, speaking of, Peach is actually real good for this challenge. Her side B sends her a decent distance forward both on the ground and in the air, making for quite the versatile movement option. Oh yeah, and also her up B moves her forward a little bit, like Mario, which is really nice to have since it lets us do more precise movements. And after about 1,000 hachas to get through this level, it was goddamn monkey time. As much as it pains me to say it, DK is absolute garbage, can't do anything. Little DK, on the other hand, has some really nice options. Diddy's side B is obviously his primary selling point, as it not only sends him flying, but can also be either normal inputted or smash inputted, depending on how fast you flick the C-stick. This sends him different distances, providing an extra bit of control. In addition, the recoil from his peanut gun can be used for good old-fashioned microspacing. The only challenge in this level was not dying, as doing so would forcefully switch me to DK, who's so bad I can't even kill him. But Diddy ended up being just enough to pull through. Next up, we got the most exciting level. Again, we get the choice between either Pit or Mario, so you already know what time it is. And yes, I just flew through the whole thing. I lied, it wasn't a very exciting level. Anyway, some story thing must have happened that killed off DK, cause he's been replaced by Fox. And although this guy's side B is a viable movement option and its length can be controlled if you're insane, Diddy is still generally more usable. Heck, some of these clips make it look like I'm not even doing a no moving challenge. This, however, was all about to change, as next up is the Ruined Zoo, where we're finally introduced to some new blood. Unfortunately though, Lucas is kinda stinky. And not only that, but we're also immediately thrust into an auto-scroller, which expects us to constantly be moving. It's not hard to see why this is an issue. So, as a result, I had to pull out some nonsense strats. Lucas's only movement option is PK Fire, which sends him backwards a little bit. But I can put an extra bit of sauce on it by using it in the air and following it up with the PK Magnet, which carries out the momentum just a bit further, getting even more distance. This is called magnet pulling, and I don't know how or why it works. What do you expect from me? With this movement tech, I was able to just barely conserve enough lives to survive through the auto-scroller and beat up Porky. However, rather than continuing this garbage into the next level, I decided to switch off to the newly introduced Squirtle, who, despite not even having a down B yet, has a whopping 4 movement options. He has the equivalent of Mario's Flood and Up B, a side B that goes absolutely nuts, and the first example of a jab combo that inches him forward while on the ground. And guess what? None of that saves him from being the most annoying character to use of all time. I hate him so much. His biggest problem is one he shares with a lot of the cast, and that's the fact that turning around is a dang chore without the joystick. Sometimes all I want is to cross the tiniest little gap, but options that aren't his side B only work when you're facing a certain direction. And although characters like Mario or Pit have nice and easy ways to use the C-stick to spin around, my guy Squirtle here can't manage it without flying across the entire screen. There is a technique called B reversing, which allows you to use non-side Bs to turn around, but although it can be done with the C-stick, it's not very consistent. Either that or I'm just bad at the game. Couple all that with the fact that getting blasted blasted by enemies constantly turns you all sorts of directions, and it makes these seemingly great moves like Squirtle's side B actually much more trouble than they're worth. Okay, so I think a genie or something heard me say all that, cause now that we're out of that level, we gotta play as Marth, in the longest, flattest, most open level of all time. And what's this guy's best movement option? Technically, his up B and neutral B also propel him forward like an inch, but his side B was the fastest of these options, and hey, at least I can turn around real easy. While we're waiting, if you're wondering how I managed to make it through brain-rotting sections like these without losing my incredible intellect, it's because there was actually a constant stream of knowledge and entertainment being injected into my brain throughout the entire challenge. In other words, I was just listening to an audiobook through Audible. Audible is this massive library of literally thousands of titles, so it's pretty much got everything you'd ever want. If you're like me and you want to learn about how video games work and how they're made, I just finished Blood, Sweat, and Pixels during this challenge, and it's everything I've ever wanted. They even gave me a shout out, how cool is that? And for all my students out there, yes, you can crank up the audiobook speed to, say, I don't know, catch up on any reading assignments. I'm just throwing out ideas. How's Marth doing? Oh, okay, he's barely moved. I'm gonna keep going then. Get this, if you click the link in the description, it's audibletrial.com/sample, and you get to try out Audible for 30 days free with no strings attached. That's effectively just a free audiobook for a month. My personal favorite audiobook that I've ever listened to was Stephen King's It. I listened to it about a year ago. It's a dang banger. So if you need something to do while traveling or just while hanging out, dude, you could have 44 hours of free entertainment. Again, links in the description if you're interested, and oh my god, how has he barely gotten anywhere? To make this whole experience a little less painful, I began to utilize 3 new movement techniques that can be done with any character. 2 of them involve getting hit by enemies. Straight up damage boosts can be pretty great as they cover a lot of distance, but they're also pretty risky since I don't have any control of where I get launched. And dying too much is obviously not ideal. Shielding attacks, however, is much more manageable, as I don't get launched nearly as far, and I don't build up any damage in the process. The third technique is much more niche, but I thought it would be worth mentioning that landing on slopes can also push you a little in the direction the slope is facing, which is great when you can only take 1 step per second. But after that breezy 10-minute stroll, we were finally introduced to Metaknight, a character who is commonly regarded as the far and away, no questions asked, best fighter in the entire game, and yeah, he's mid-tier in this challenge. He's got the same problem as Squirtle. His side B, up B, glide, and even his down B to an extent can all be used to get massive amounts of distance, but he's got no precision, no grace with his movements, and nowhere to freaking turn around. Despite his disappointing showing, however, Metaknight still has plenty of good stuff to get through the rest of this level, which means we're moving on to 2 more new characters, Yoshi and Link. Now, I initially assumed that Yoshi would be better here, and to be fair, it was a pretty reasonable assumption. Yoshi's side B is clearly quite useful, and additionally, his grounded down B can also push him forward a bit. However, both of these moves crumble when it comes to crossing even the tiniest gaps like this one, as they both need to be on the ground in order to actually gain any distance. And this is where my man Link comes in. Most of this guy's special moves are just projectiles, most of which are completely useless. The exception, however, is his down B, which spawns a bomb, and if regular damage boosts from enemies can occasionally be useful, then the ability to remotely blast ourselves across levels is a great tool to have, outside of the fact that it's really hard to use. Now, there are 2 important things to note here. One is that the direction you get sent depends on where the bomb is relative to Link at the time of explosion, meaning that in almost all cases, I turn around with the boomerang in order to face away from the direction that I want to go, as Link's idle animation holds the bomb in front of him. The second thing is actually blowing up the bomb. It is on a timer, meaning that we could just wait half a minute every time we wanted to move, but since that obviously sucks, throwing the bomb to blow it up earlier seems much more manageable. Unfortunately, throwing items up or down requires the joystick, and the C-stick for once doesn't actually help us here, so I instead utilized a trick called Z-dropping, which involves pressing the grab button while you're in the air in order to drop whatever item you're holding right in front of you. However, even with all these little bits of tech to optimize moving around with bombs, this doesn't stop us from taking a stupid amount of damage, which will eventually lead to our deaths if we aren't careful. This effectively means that the number of bomb boosts that we can do is limited to a finite amount, as we just have 4 lives per level, of which only 2 are Link stocks, so bad planning can lead to a game over. Honestly though, this would all mostly be fine if it weren't for this section right here. We have to press this button in order to make some platforms spawn, but they only stick around for a couple seconds before they disappear. My first go at this room involved using my insanely high damage to try and blast myself all the way up and land on this permanent platform. But being this high in percent really takes away a lot of your control and damage. damage boosting. So instead, I eventually found out that you can actually make it up these platforms without damage boosting by utilizing this ladder. Now, although you can't hold the C-stick to climb up and down ladders like you can with the joystick, I found that you can cling onto ladders by tapping the C-stick either up or down. Doing this refreshes your double jump, which means this can be used to kinda sorta climb ladders. Once I got up to this platform with relatively low damage, however, I had to build back up to a little higher percent to actually get out. In order to ensure that I didn't bounce all over the place and fall off the platform while doing this, I used a trick called teching, which allows you to completely halt your launching momentum on a wall, floor, or ceiling so long as you press the shield button right before you collide with it. So with that, I was able to blast myself out of there and make my way to the end of the hardest level thus far. But now we're out of there and we're into here, where we are yet again introduced to some more new boys and girls. The first is Zero Suit Samus, who's just so good in this challenge. Her down B propels her a decent bit in the direction she's facing, which isn't a problem, since her stationary side B makes turning around way less of an issue. She also has a moving jab combo, giving her great access to precise movement, and with the right setup, she can even teleport. Look, if this isn't the mark of a top tier character, then I don't know what is. Speaking of these elevators, by the way, it should come as no surprise that the C-stick lets us move up and down these things without any worries. It wasn't long until we were introduced to Pikachu, and although Samus is certainly very good, I knew that Pikachu's side B could be an alright tool in this challenge, so I decided to give him a try. Turns out, the side B is all he's got. Not only that though, but the C-stick inputs only last a few frames, if not just a single frame. Meaning that, although you can usually charge this side B to go varying distances, trying to hold the C-stick in a direction doesn't achieve the same effect. We can, however, use our understanding of how the C-stick works to our advantage. Since the input gets translated to a directional input and a B input, what we can do is tap the C-stick in a direction and then immediately start holding the actual B button. This tricks the game into combining the B input from the C-stick and the B input from the B button and interprets it as one held B press, allowing us to charge up our side B like normal and use it to get the precise distance needed to enter the door. What I didn't know, however, was that beyond this door would be our greatest obstacle yet. An obstacle that first appears in this next room and then continues to be a threat throughout the entire rest of the game. Say hello to the ladder on a platform that we're expected to go down. Yeah, I don't have a name for it or anything. Now, although I did say that you can kinda climb up ladders by using the C-stick to repeatedly refresh your double jump, I said nothing about going down ladders. Like I was just talking about with Pikachu's side B, the C-stick input only lasts a couple frames at most, meaning that the most it's gonna do for us is provide the directional input needed to climb down a single rung. At which point, touching the C-stick again in any direction will just make you jump off the ladder, starting us back off at square one. So what do we do here then? We can go down a tiny bit, but the only option to get off a ladder that we have access to is jumping. And although some characters do, neither Pikachu nor Zero Suit Samus have moves that immediately stop their aerial momentum. So it seems that no matter what we do, we're just gonna pop right back up every time we try to go down. But not all hope is lost. I went ahead and killed Pikachu here so I could switch back to Samus. Since her model is a lot taller than Pikachu's, going down a single ladder rung actually places her much lower on the ladder. And with a little help from a nearby Rob, we were able to use this extra bit of downward distance to our advantage. Aw, yeah. Although we can't get off a ladder without jumping on our own, we can get knocked off a ladder with a little bit of help. And with that, we were able to cruise right on through the rest of the level without anything to fear. This next level starts off with a couple normal fights, which I promise you are not interesting. After that, we got the boys together, which is both a good and a bad thing. On one hand, having a lot of character options is better than having no choice at all. But on the other hand, half of these guys aren't all that. In addition, since I have to pick 4 characters here, all of them get 1 stock apiece. This means that, unlike previous levels, I can't just cycle through my lives to get back to a good character that died, and I'll instead have to work with whoever else comes down the line. Even beyond that though, this level is still quite the doozy. In particular, this auto-scroller is pretty brutal. Although these guys are at least pretty alright, they're also really slow, which doesn't make them great fits for an auto-scroller. This leaves us with Pit and his dodgy gliding ability as our only good option. Luckily, I discovered a pretty neat way to make his glide even better for us in the form of momentum conservation. There are a few ways to cancel the glide before landing, but the most interesting is the glide attack, as using it right before landing cancels all of the glide's landing lag. If we jump immediately after doing this then, we can retain some of the glide's momentum in the air, allowing us much more freedom in our movement. Now, although this trick did work great for the auto-scroller, this next level with these guys seem to really want to highlight the weaknesses of this glide. The ceilings here are just so low, making even initiating a glide way harder than it needs to be. And the ceiling in this spot in particular, too low to initiate a glide at all. Trust me, I tried this section with Pit for a while and it just doesn't seem possible. Luckily, we do still have access to the other boys here, but they all suck in their own special little ways. Link seems to be our next best option, as he certainly wouldn't have any problem blasting through this locked door section. But the knockback that he receives from his own bombs is too vertical to feasibly make it through the tunnel right before the section. One thing you can do is slightly change the knockback angle after you get hit by using a technique called directional influence, or DI. It sounds fancy, but all it is holding the direction you want to go after getting hit. Unfortunately, we can't do this with the C-stick because, as we all know at this point, the C-stick doesn't do constant directional input. What we can do, however, is something called Smash Directional Influence, or SDI, which actually is kind of fancy. Whenever you get hit, you experience what's called hit lag, a handful of frames where your character just vibes and plays for a little bit. During this time, you can tap the joystick, or in our case the C-stick, in order to kinda nudge yourself in the direction you want to go before getting launched. Much to our dismay, however, this isn't nearly as useful as regular DI would be, and it doesn't seem to be enough to get us through here. I tried Mario next, since he's already proven that he has what it takes to cross tiny gaps, but he too struggles to get the horizontal distance needed to make it through this tunnel before even getting there. This left us with Yoshi, our only option remaining since this guy doesn't count. I had to coerce the fish enemy to damage boost me over to the entrance of the tunnel, but once I got there, his side B ended up being a great way to make it all the way through without any trouble. That being said though, yeah, you can't make it over this gap either. Jeez, this is rough. But don't worry, cause I had a plan. Instead of unlocking this top door to access the rest of the level, I instead unlocked the middle door, which gave me a second key, which I could then use to unlock the top door. Alright, I know that sounds insane, but now I had access to these flame geysers, which could eventually kill me, unlike these things which seem to just do set knockback. Upon dying, I could respawn as Mario, use him to make it through the top path, and then very slowly inch my way to the end of the level. Yeah, I didn't even need these guys for this one. Quite fitting that Mario's most impactful moment in the entire run involves using Yoshi as a step stool. Anyway, this next level brings these two guys back, and honestly, I know I put Squirtle higher on the tier list, and that he's the character that I'm actually using in these clips, but if any of you guys try this challenge yourselves, just use Lucas. He's way easier to manage, and Squirtle is just not built for precision platforming. For some reason though, we only had one level of this before we were back to the squad. I chose Pit again in another area with low ceilings because I'm pretty sure I'm dumb, but it's still perfectly possible to make it through no problem. Which is great, because any other character in this specific spot would just be absolute pain. And I was even able to show off some more glide canceling strats on these platforms later on, so I'd say it was easily all worth it. Pit did eventually die halfway through the level, however, switching me off to Link. And this was when I started to implement some brand new Link movement tech. I call it the Link Bomb Z Drop Shield Push Combo, or the This little tech lets us move very slightly horizontally without having to take any damage, which makes using this guy much more reasonable. Also, here's a cool section. It's not hard or anything, it's just that if I press this button then the ceiling starts coming down, and we don't move fast enough to get out of the way. So I just thought it was funny that my best option was to not press the button and just slowly inch my way through the poison gas and take a billion damage. After that, doing damage boosts of any kind just made me super die, so I had to use Mario again to finally close out the level. Hey look, we're back to these goobers again. And yeah, I chose Squirtle. Except this time he might actually be necessary. Pretty much this entire level requires you to go fast, and that's honestly this little dude's specialty. We also technically unlocked Ivysaur at some point apparently, but this guy's pure filth in this game in absolutely every context, so he's completely irrelevant. It would have been nice to have a better character here too, cause this horde fight is the first one in a while that really gave me a run for my money. With such a limited moveset, Squirtle is just so bad at killing enemies, and him being hard to control definitely doesn't help. And it's not like Lucas is great either. Sure, it's definitely easier to kill stuff with him with his stronger moves and projectiles, but he's just doomed as soon as he gets launched off stage. I'm pretty sure that you need to keep Squirtle around anyway, cause there's another speed section immediately after these fights that Lucas would not have a very fun time with. But after all that, alongside a slick kill on Charizard, we were finally out of there. Finally! We get to play some other characters. Although Marth still ain't all that, and I honestly didn't even notice that Ike was an option here, making Meta Knight our best bet, especially considering that we got wind and auto-scrollers to deal with. I did eventually die, and to my surprise, respawned as Ike. And hey, this guy's actually pretty good. He's got a chargeable side B much like Pikachu, and his up B pushes him forward just a little bit. Overall, pretty alright character. I feel bad for mistaking him for someone else. So these next two levels are just the same boss fight twice. I did the second one with our newly unlocked Charizard, who by the way way, wouldn't be half bad if I ever used him for a real level. He's also got a glide and an okay up B, putting Pokemon Trainer as an overall character probably in top tier, but I also hate Squirtle with all my being, so this is where he goes. After another level with the boys, which didn't really amount to anything special, it was finally monkey time again. Man, I wish it was always monkey time. We also pick up Falco midway through the level, but for all intents and purposes, this guy may as well just be a second fox. And yeah, that's it was an easy level. Next up, we got another level with Samus and Pikachu, which introduces the absolute worst thing in this entire challenge. The semi-solid, oh wait, hold on, let me turn the lights on. There we go, the semi-solid platform. Dropping through platforms requires holding down on the joystick, and this cannot be replicated with the C-stick, making this the most daunting obstacle we've ever seen. Oh wait, what? Yeah, I mean, I guess that also works. There's nothing to explain here. Samus's down B just makes her go through platforms. It's that simple. If I got here with literally any other character, I think I'd be ruined. But it's no big deal for now. And, although it's pretty hard to see, I went ahead and did another one of those newfangled damage boosts to go through a platform with a ladder, which also just looked pretty funny. But all was not what it seemed. For once we made our way through this section and beat up some robots, our 0-suit Samus was upgraded to 1-suit Samus, which, unfortunately for us, is actually quite the downgrade. With the suit equipped, all Samus can do for movement is shoot the charge shot and get a bit of recoil, something I didn't even think of until way later, leaving all the upcoming work to Pikachu. Farewell, my precious top tier. You will be remembered. Well, this stinks. Pikachu's fine, I guess, but I just wish he had more than a single movement option, especially since this next section requires at least semi-particular movement. It wasn't until this section, though, where I had enough. Going through these portals and traversing tiny rooms is just not something I want to do with a character that can only move 10 feet at a time. So let's switch up our characters. Yeah, so apparently you can take off Samus's suit by doing some weird button combination on the D-pad or something. I don't know, I just go crazy on that thing for a couple seconds and it'd usually just work. Unfortunately, we still ran into a bit of a weird problem even with our resurrected queen. I'm pretty sure you're usually supposed to just be able to walk into these portals to teleport, but that just might be a result of joystick privilege. I eventually figured out that you have to tap up on the C-stick while moving through them, so they were just kind of weirder, more finicky doors. Wait, what? You're telling me that this next level introduces new characters? I thought we ran out of those. I'm pretty sure Olimar can't do anything, but I never tried him because Captain Falcon is a dang terror. Let me run down the list here. His side B is your standard go forward move on both the ground and the air. His down B can go real far if you use it on the ground. His up B boops him forward a little bit. I think his jab combo does something, I don't remember. And even the raw force behind the Falcon Punch is capable of moving him a tiny bit. Easy top tier. I just wish he could turn around easier. One simple level later, and we were back to the sword crew. Man, Marth and Ike are looking a little weird these days. This level is mostly vertical, which honestly makes Meta Knight and his complete lack of subtlety a pretty bad option here. Once I inevitably died, I found that the ice climbers definitely would have been a much better way to go. Their side B nudges you forward just the tiniest bit, and if you initiate the side B with the C-stick and then mash the B button, you can drastically change the height you gain from it, making it a pretty flexible movement option. Doesn't help here though. After a quick fight with the furry and a horde fight starring our favorite goofy group of gentlemen, we schmooved our way into the battleship Halberd interior, where we're forced to play as yet another new guy, Snake. So for the first 10 minutes of this level, I was for some reason adamant on only using his jab combo to move a singular nanometer at a time. It's not hard, however, to find the exact moment where I gave up on that nonsense and started pulling out what really makes this character shine. Much like Link, Snake's got bombs. Lots of bombs. He's got grenades, which eventually explode, but my go-to option for movement with this guy was his down B, C4. After placing C4 on the ground, you can down B again to detonate it, allowing us plenty of control in not only where we launch, but also when. This is incredibly important in the section immediately following this one, as these falling platforms require us to be a little bit faster than we might be comfortable with. In order to make it past here, I had to blow myself up, jump and up B before falling to my doom, B reverse a down B in order to drop a C4 to the left of me, detonate it in midair, and then do it again for good measure. This allows us to breeze through yet another level with only one character available. Thank God. Jeez, Marth and Ike are looking real weird. I, of course, chose Meta Knight here once more, but his mid-tier status is really starting to show here, and I probably should have just stuck with Snake and endured the consequences. The goal of this room is to press all of the big red buttons in order to unlock the exit. Unfortunately, to traverse this area in its entirety, you have to make your way down 4 ladders. Okay, this one on the far left left technically wasn't necessary, but I didn't know that at the time. The worst part by far was this area here, with 2 ladders back to back. The enemies that I need to dismount these ladders are pretty limited in this level, so I had to bait these guys from all the way up here to follow me down. From there, trying to preemptively position myself on the ladder would make them drop through the platform, at which point they would no longer be able to hit me. So I had to time pressing down on the C-stick at the exact moment they would start attacking in order to make it through the platforms and escape. It is possible to avoid doing any of this room entirely by clipping out of bounds at the beginning and then navigating to the door from there. Not that it'd be useful in this challenge, it's definitely way harder than just doing it normally. I just wanted to show you guys a cool trick. Is there anything wrong with showing you guys a cool trick? Anyway, Meta Knight died, so now it's showtime. But almost poetically, we pretty quickly run into a problem that closely resembles that of the last snake obstacle we've encountered. Except this time, there aren't even blocks to land on and break our fall, meaning we're gonna have to pull out some nonsense. For my first maneuver, I blow myself up with the C4 such that I bounce right into this corner and cause what's called a slide off. Usually when you land after getting hit, you get put into a knockdown state, at which point you can get up. But if you slide off of an edge while in knockdown, you immediately become actionable as soon as you go airborne. I use this here to up B while still experiencing some knockback in order to move a significant distance through the air. From there, I attempt one of those B reverse C4s from earlier so I can land here and tech in order to find some stable footing. But I mistimed the tech, causing me to accidentally do a slide off and then buffer an air dodge like an idiot. Luckily, I went ahead and used another 2% of my gaming prowess to clutch it out no problem. Unluckily, however, this next room presented an even bigger obstacle. Like that one previous room, we have to unlock this room's exit. However, instead of pressing all the buttons, we have to kill all of the enemies. Let me present the situation. This is the exit, and this is a ladder we'll have to go down in order to reach the exit. At which point, the exit will be unlocked, and every single enemy will necessarily be dead. Yeah, it'll be kinda hard to do damage boost with no enemies around, huh? Now, if you're like me, you might be thinking, okay, yeah, that seems like it could be a pretty big problem considering damage boosts are the only way to go down ladders, but I've been damage boosting all over the dang place with Snake without the need for enemies. Would that not work? Well, the issue with that is the fact that both grenades and C4 send Snake directly up. So unless I was at 0%, which seems kinda unlikely, damage boosting with these explosives would be no better than jumping off the ladder. You wanna know what does work though? Jumping off the ladder. Since when did this work? It turns out the Snake is the perfect combination of being tall and having a low jump, meaning that he goes real low when climbing down a single ladder rung and is able to jump off without popping right back up on the platform. Now this means 2 things. 1, I wasted an hour of my life for literally nothing, and 2, we gotta keep Snake alive. However, much like with Link, existing at well over kill percent and having exploding as our primary movement option isn't the most stable state of being. But with enough techs, shields, and tactical nukes, we were able to make it through just fine. Here's about 10 seconds of me being forced to play Lucario. Yeah, Sid, I didn't play him any more than that. Look out, cause this next section involves girl power. Okay, bad example, cause this section might just be impossible. See, Peach's side B is really good for direct movement, but with this gap being fairly large alongside the wind pushing us to the left, it's just not an explosive enough move to cover that large of a distance in one foul swoop, especially considering how much height you lose when you use it in the air. Its weakness is spelled out so clearly here that it might be a bit confusing as to why I ever put Peach in top tier to begin with. Well, if you really want to know, it's because Peach has a secret tool hidden up her sleeve that we've had no need for until now. Peach's down B plucks turnips out of the ground, which are just standard projectiles. There's nothing special about these things, until there is. Whenever you pluck a turnip, it has a chance of having some different properties. If you're lucky, it'll be way stronger and deal way more knockback. But if you're really lucky, you can pull out some wacky stuff. Roll 0.625% odds and you'll see this weird looking turnip, which breaks shields instantly. Roll the even lower 0.21% odds and you'll see an even weirder looking turnip. But get a roll somewhere in between those two, and you'll get something magical. Now that's the explosive movement that we've been looking for. 2 bombs in about half an hour is all we need to get through this wind room, and the rest of the level can be completed by just using Peach's basic movement techniques. Apparently the next level was another one with Samus and Pikachu, but it's honestly all Haze at this point. I assume it was easy. This next level though involved a bunch more going down ladders, but rather than being obstacles, this time they were mere examples for the top tiers to show off why they're here. Diddy's up B completely stops his upward momentum if you use it after jumping, making it possible to tap down on the C-stick to climb down a bit, jump, immediately tap up on the C-stick, and then hold the B button in order to fall all the way down. And if you think that's a nice tool to have, take a look at what Falcon can do. Oh yeah, it's that easy. After that, the Avengers finally assemble, and Rob also shows up, I guess. I never ended up using him because, like, why would I? But his side B can probably push him forward a bit, and he's just a nifty little guy. How could I put him in bottom tier? By the way, I have access to way too many good characters for this next level to be a problem. Although there are some downwards ladders, this level consists of mostly auto-scrollers, so dying and respawning was an easy way past them. However, despite our great progress, alongside this next level letting us choose pretty much whoever we want, making it absolutely no problem, disaster was about to strike. Unfortunately, the only character in this game to have any apocalypse preparations in order was King Dedede, which means our choice for this next level involves him and these two dweebs. The king himself is absolute trash, and although I did find out later that canceling Ness's double jump with PK Fire makes movement possible, he's not a particularly inspiring character, leaving Luigi here as our only hope. He's got Pikachu's side B and a moving jab combo, so he actually seems pretty alright at first. That is until this happens. Yeah, so Luigi has a 1 in 8 chance of just exploding whenever he uses side B, which makes movement extremely unpredictable. And it doesn't help that this level is a bit unique. Just getting through it is one thing, but now that everyone is dead, we gotta collect these trophies throughout the game in order to revive them to use them later. Luigi here isn't gonna cut it on his own in the endgame, so I grabbed Samus, Pit, Falco, Marth for some reason, Falcon, and Mario, who is just near the exit anyway. And although re-unlocking all of these characters may have been a good way to set ourselves up for success in the future, it's not gonna matter if we can't even get there to begin with. For after trekking through subspace with this wacky cast and crew, we get to play as the only other apocalypse survivor in the dang universe. And although I've been getting away with completely avoiding him up until this point, we're now gonna have to figure out a way through an entire level with only Kirby at our disposal. Kirby has been in the dumps of the tier list for a reason, alright? He doesn't have a moving jab, his neutral B does literally nothing, and all of his specials are completely stationary as far as horizontal movement goes. And although there are some movement techniques that apply to all characters, they usually require specific terrain or enemies to be around. Being forced to play through an entire late game level with what is quite possibly the worst character in the entire challenge is nothing short of a completely impossible situation. But, as the smartest person in human history once said, everybody has got some schmovement. But if you judge a Kirby by his ability to move with special stick, then he will live his whole life believing that he's bottom tier garbage. That's right, we're changing our controls. Although having our C-Stick do special moves is absolutely the best option for the entire cast as a whole, Kirby here clearly could use some change. And as it turns out, having Smash Stick instead changes the game completely. Not only does Kirby's forward smash allow him to travel decently fast on the ground, but having Smash Stick also gives us access to directional aerial attacks, of which forward air actually has the ability to push Kirby along just the tiniest bit. With these brand new moves at our disposal, we may actually have the smallest bit of a chance. Since our movement capabilities are still incredibly limited, especially in the air, damage boosting and even death warping are going to become much more prominent in this level. This means that our percent and life count are both extremely valuable resources that we can't afford to waste, and this can be seen fairly early in the level. There's a decently long auto-scroller in between these two horde fights that sorta acts as a toll bridge, and the toll seems to be at least 2 of our precious lives. This means that I not only can't die up to this point, but it's also almost necessary to get an extra life to spawn right before it, allowing us to reach the second horde fight with 2 extra lives at our disposal. But our problems in this room aren't quite solved once we reach this fight. After completing it, the exit actually appears to be impossible to reach, for there's no way to cross these gaps as Kirby without damage boosting. And because of the fight being necessary to complete, all of the enemies in this room are dead at this point. But by hanging out next to this very last enemy in the fight, it's possible to get extremely lucky and have him hit you off screen and then throw himself off the stage, ending the fight and spawning the exit platform right under you. We're still not through the level yet though. After a couple more rooms of forward smashing and damage boosting, we get to this thing, a timed platforming section. This place is brutal, and in order to even begin tackling it, I went ahead and intentionally built up a ton of damage on Kirby, so I can get launched further from these ball clone enemy things. And after a good half hour of getting knocked around, I eventually managed to get hit twice in quick succession on my way up here, which was just enough to make it past. Now, spoiler alert, this horde fight is very similar to the last one. one. For once we finish off every enemy, we're expected to do some platforming before we can finally finish off the level and get out of here. There's a bit of a problem this time though. Although we can damage boost with the final enemy and have that enemy die by their own hands soon afterward, it doesn't seem to be enough this time. How far we go obviously depends on our percent, so if we're too low, we won't get sent all the way to the exit. But on the flip side, if we're too high in percent, the damage boost is just gonna kill us well before the fight actually ends. And as much as I hate to say it, I don't think there's an in-between sweet spot percent that does what we want to do. No matter what I tried at the end of the fight here, the best I could do was get to the platform right before the exit. One little jump is what stopped us from finally completing the level. So close, and yet there's nothing we can really do here. It really sucks to have come this far in the level, only to be hit with the roadblock so simple looking. So much for conserving my health and lives, huh? Yeah, you bet I pulled out the depressing vibes just to play with your emotions. I knew that dying here would warp you to the door since the beginning. What, do you think I didn't make a plan for this level? And with that, Kirby skyrockets into the still bad but positionally above all the other characters because he deserves it tier, and we move on to the final level in the game, the Great Maze. And although this labyrinth is an infamously huge level, we have access to every character we saved in both of the subspace levels. And we're able to heal and switch characters at every checkpoint, which means nothing was stopping us from flipping, kicking, and flip-kicking our way through the entire thing with almost no issue. Almost no issue. Because as it turns out, there is exactly one issue, an issue that we have only come across once in the entire challenge so far. An issue that seemed like such a non-issue at the time that I didn't pay any mind to it potentially being an issue ever again. But in the deepest, furthest corner of the Great Maze lies a couple of required doors. Doors that are only accessible beyond some semi-solid platforms. Oh, no problem, said past me, completely clueless. Last time we saw one of these, Samus's down B could just go straight through it, and we still got access to Samus, so this shouldn't be an issue at all. And although this line of reasoning was certainly optimistic and seemed logical enough, it overlooks two incredibly important differences between these two situations, and the first one became apparent immediately. In more recent games, Zero Suit Samus's down B can be used to jump off walls if you press the jump button, but in Brawl, these bounces happen automatically. This fact makes the extremely tight walls in this area force Samus straight up, no matter where or when she uses the move. The only way to avoid this wall bounce is to either attack and end the move early, which also makes it not go through platforms, or not collide with the wall to begin with, which doesn't seem too feasible. But I didn't get this far into the challenge just to give up after a teeny bit of resistance, okay? I still had some ideas to make this work. My first was to use co-op mode for the first time in the challenge. This means that we can now control two characters at once, and although we can't hit each other or anything, we can slightly push each other around. Theoretically, if I can have Samus do her down B and have the other character push her away from the wall, then she should be able to avoid hitting the wall entirely. However, my first attempt made this strategy look fruitless, as although Mario here could certainly push Samus a little bit, it didn't seem like nearly enough. But that's when I pulled out the big boy. DK is so bad at moving that he can even make other characters move significantly less. So with this ape's big ol' collision box, we can set up our own roadblock to keep Samus far away from the wall, which doesn't let her go through the platform. And this is where the second important difference between these two obstacles comes into play: the ceiling. Samus's down B only goes through platforms if you're actually in the middle of the move, and it usually ends before you actually reach the ground. The ceiling in this area then was actually very important, as it reduced our height enough to ensure that we were still flip kicking once we intersected with the platform. But with no ceiling, this seems impossible. But I was still not ready to give up on this lead. Sure, a normal grounded down B ends up being too high to go through platforms, but what about using down B in the air? Sure, it sounds dumb, jumping doesn't reduce height after all, but take a look at Samus's position when she does a short hop. As you can see, she curls up into a bit of a ball, and since her model is normally pretty tall, this means that we can actually get lower to the ground when she's airborne compared to when she's grounded. And as it turns out, using her down B the frame before landing after a short hop allows you to go through platforms. So put these two things together to recreate the circumstances of the first time we've seen this obstacle, and it doesn't work. I don't know why. I feel like it definitely should work, but it just doesn't. And in all honesty, even if it did, I wouldn't be able to do the same thing for the second platform, as DK would have no way of dropping down himself. Even though everything seemed like it was going right, it just wasn't enough. And with Samus now off the table, I honestly had no ideas left. This was the only thing that I was aware of that goes through platforms, which meant that all I could do at this point was try absolutely everything. I tried damage boosting and using frame perfect STI to go down. I tried to maybe get out of bounds like you can in that one similar looking level. And I even made another control scheme with attack stick to see if any character's tilts would be of any interest. All to no avail. At this point, I was just doing random stuff with random characters, hoping and praying to just stumble upon another trick to go through platforms like I did with Samus. And when I ran out of characters to try, I went back into the subspace levels to unlock more. One of these characters must have a useful move, I was sure of it. PK Flash, Dimensional Cape, Yoshi Bomb, Squall Hammer, Special Stick, Smash Stick, Attack Stick, try everything, and even if it looked a little close, try it again. It got to the point where I was inputting so many different random button combinations that I started coming across some of the most deranged, nonsensical tech you can imagine. Did you know that in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, if you play as Peach with Attack Stick and then tap down on the C Stick exactly 3 times in a row, then she does a down tilt and then jumps backwards with full momentum? And if you only tap down twice on the C-Stick, then you can input other things like shield or jab, also with backwards momentum. I promise I'm not touching the joystick in these clips. I don't even know how I'd replicate this movement with the joystick. But through this rigorous testing, I slowly began to build an understanding. Not of any particular character, but of the C-Stick that we've been relying on throughout the entire challenge. Clearly, there was still some mystery surrounding it, and as I cycled through all the characters trying every move I thought that might be useful, my mind started to center around only a single possible avenue of success. See, if the C-Stick was capable of spitting out up inputs that could be used to enter doors, then I couldn't help but think that it had to be able to give me the down inputs I need to drop through platforms. I mean, we've been using the C-Stick for directional input throughout the entire game, and through elevators and ladders, we've even inadvertently proven that down inputs in particular are no exception. All we have to do is somehow purposefully block the button input as we tap the C-Stick, and we might be able to directly access that directional input. And doing so is actually a lot simpler than you may expect. What if we just hold the button? If the game is already receiving a constant stream of that button's input, then how would the game interpret a C-Stick input? Would it just mold the button in with the already existing stream and just give us the direction? Well, unfortunately for us, the developers seem to have thought of this, as tapping the C-Stick while holding down the button that it produces just makes you jump, seemingly as a failsafe for this exact situation. But then, what if I also hold the jump button? Would I be able to access directional input then? Well, the simple answer appears to be also no. I have attack stick in this clip, I'm holding the A button and the X button, and now the C stick just does nothing. Presumably taking the directional inputs and just trashing them, giving us nothing. Except, that's not true. It doesn't look like anything is happening when I tap down on the C stick normally, but check out what happens when I tap down on the C stick while in shield. A shield tilt, something that is usually only possible with the joystick. These directional inputs from the C-Stick weren't disappearing. They exist, and now we just have to find a way to use them. I racked my brain for a while on why these inputs seemed so insignificant that they were almost hidden, until I finally landed on the answer. I was using attack stick. This particular C-Stick configuration does tilt attacks, which are not quite as simple as just a direction and a button input. As you may be able to figure, tilt attacks are performed by tilting the stick and attacking. Smash attacks, by contrast, are performed by smashing the stick and attacking. The only difference being the magnitude that the stick is tilted. The reason why these inputs don't do anything outside of the tiniest little shield tilts is because they are, by design, smaller inputs. So by switching off to either smash stick or special stick, we can see what this input blocking technique can do with some stronger directional inputs. Yeah, you're seeing that right. And every single one of these up, down, left, and right inputs are all being produced by the C-Stick. I call this strat the frick the challenge, I'm just gonna move anyway technique. Now, although running around with this tech would definitely be banned had I known about it before the challenge, as it is just straight up moving, using it to conjure up down inputs is perfectly fine in my book. So now that we can finally directly access down inputs, we still can't drop through the platform, dude. I'm seriously gonna cry. There's no way this technique isn't enough. How much further am I expected to go? Turns out, not that far actually. Now that we have access to down inputs, we can do the only other platform dropping technique that I know of, shield dropping. Shield dropping requires, you guessed it, shielding, and then pressing down somewhere in this area. Tap down too far and you'll spot dodge, but not far enough and it won't do anything. But if we can manage to hit that golden sweet spot with our lost and confused down inputs while in shield, then maybe our single frame of downwards movement will finally be enough. And I mean, if it is, then what challenge would even be left in this game? Getting past this platform wasn't just a simple obstacle where we had to come up with one trick. It involved testing every single thing that we learned throughout the entire game. Everything about all the characters, the mechanics, and even its oversights. Everything we learned went into going through this platform. With how much knowledge that we had to apply in this last obstacle, the question of whether or not it's possible to beat the subspace emissary without moving the joystick can be answered in one single clip. Oh my gosh, hi, welcome to the end of the video. I get it, this was my longest challenge video by a large margin, but I hope it was worth it. And hey, I needed a win too. I've been failing some challenges recently, so being able to successfully complete this one was so nice. If you want more from me, you know the deal, you know the YouTube things, they're right there. Don't forget about Audible either. Even just doing a free trial supports me tremendously. And it is the only reason I'm still saying that. That part wasn't a joke. But yeah, I think that's all the formalities and whatnot, so see ya.